Hey guys, this is Josh here with Trillium Wild Edibles, and today I wanted to show you 36 wild edibles and medicinal plants that can be found all over the United States. There are a lot of wild edibles and medicinal plants in the US, with most usually growing right next to each other, so it's a good idea to learn as many as you can because you never know what's around the corner. Like right now, for example, we're looking at this large white Trillium. These leaves would be edible, however I wouldn't recommend picking the leaves of this plant because this plant is extremely rare, at least in Indiana. So I wouldn't pick them. However, it is edible. But around me there are all kinds of other edible plants. Like here, for example, you can see a common greenbrier. These shoots right here are extremely delicious. These things are great raw. They're also really good sauteed in butter. That's my favorite way to prepare them, is saute them in butter with a little salt and garlic. They are amazing that way. Some other edible plants in the area include cleaver. You can see its four-petaled white flower here. This flower is extremely tiny. There's plenty of spice bush everywhere here. There's Canadian wood nettle here as well. Of course, there's garlic mustard, which I pulled up. There's Jack in the pulpit with its extremely distinct flower and very unique leaf pattern. We have a type of rosebriar growing in here. There's also false Solomon seal within the area. And if we come down by the creek, we'll find a lot of violets, especially white violets. You can see the flowers here, and you can see the leaves growing in. As you can see, these violet leaves are pretty good size. So between everything that I've just showed you here, you can get a substantial amount of food. All the while, you may be looking for mushrooms and not finding anything. All those different plants that I just showed you guys are right within that area, right at the end of my boken. So that's a really small area that you could have gathered a lot of food. And then here we are, just a few more steps away from that, and here's this really nice wood sorrel growing in. You can see just how large these leaves are. And again, these are going to be extremely substantial, especially when mixed with like all those violet leaves and some violet flowers. You know, cook up some nettle greens, have some of the garlic mustard. You know, you could actually walk out of here with quite a bit of food. You know, and there's some spice bush over there. You can make some spice bush tea and get yourself some food, something to drink. Right now we're looking at a raspberry, and I can tell this just mainly because it has this kind of like white, almost powdery coating along the stem. It has its distinct set of 3 leaves with teeth on the edge of the margins or on the edge of the leaf. And of course, just like any other bramble or raspberry or blackberry, it has thorns. Of course, there's dandelion here. There's a lot of broadleaf plantain. We have a variety of wild lettuce which is getting ready to flower, as you can see here. It's got these little flower buds starting. And you can tell it's a variety of wild lettuce because of this leaf. Wild lettuce's leaves are very distinct, and another way that you can tell is the milky sap whenever you pluck off one of the leaves. I always like to pluck off one of the small leaves so I'm not causing very much damage. And that's one of the best ways that I like to do a test. Now this milky sap is actually bitter and toxic if you eat it in large quantities or consume it in large quantities, mainly because it contains opiates which needs to be cooked out. Yeah, this is called lettuce, but it has to be cooked. Boiled in 2 changes of water before you can actually eat it. You cannot eat it raw. However, this plant has a much better use medicinally, and that's as a calmative or a nerve calmative or a sedative, and that's because of those opiates that it contains. There's also blackberries here. So there's raspberries, blackberries, dandelion, plantain, wild lettuce, all of that just right there in that small area. Then if we turn around, we find Daucus Carota or Queen Anne's lace, also known as wild carrot. This is an edible plant as well, just literally 2 steps away behind us. Underneath that we have quite a bit of red clover. There's also a lot of white clover in the area as well because it's a kind of a grassy area in between 2 tree lines. Here you can see the leaves of the white clover, and there you can see the flowers of the white clover. And again, those are edible as well. One of the varieties of mint that are right across the trail is bee balm. And here you can see the white flowers of mountain mint. Right below that on the edge of that field, we have black-eyed Susans, another medicinal plant. If I zoom in, you can really see the cone flowers right over there, which is another medicinal plant. We have poison ivy, which I'm not allergic to it, so don't freak out. But this is the notorious poison ivy with its distinct 3 set of leaves. Here we can see some yarrow flowers, which just barely passed its flowering stage at this point, but it's still perfectly usable. Yarrow you can use any time of the year that you find it growing, which is nice. Mind you, I haven't even began to talk about the trees or the shrubs. Like for example, right here we have Staghorn Sumac, or a variety of sumac to say the least. There you can see the sumac berries starting to form there. Oops, no you can't. There you can see the sumac berries starting to form, so we also have some sumac in the area. We're going to go up here, and then there's going to be a trail that's going to come, this trail is going to come to a T, and we're going to hang a right. And at that right, we're going to enter a huge field of more wildflowers. So I'll show you that when I get there. Well, I didn't even get there, and I already spotted more plants. Right there you can see a stinging nettle. There you may be able to see the dock or the Rumex species growing back there. I don't know if that's broadleaf or curly dock. However, it is dock and it is edible. There you can see quite a bit of echinacea or coneflower growing right there. There's a lot of that in this field. Along with bee balm and all kinds of other good stuff. Of course, there's milkweed, just like in most clearings, there's always milkweed. This plant is amazing for bringing in monarch butterflies. It's because of the loss of this plant that we're losing our monarch butterflies in this part of the country. Here you can see a hybridization between echinacea and a rudbeckia species, producing this yellow coneflower, black-eyed coneflower. I don't really know what the name of this plant is. However, I do know it is a hybrid between echinacea and black-eyed Susan, or rudbeckia. I can tell that because of its distinct cone shape and its yellow flower petals. We also have wild quinine in this area. The main reason for that is because where I'm at is more like a prairie habitat. I can tell it's wild quinine because of its very distinct white flowers and its very stiff, papery-like, lance-shaped leaves with its very sharp teeth. These leaves, as you might be able to hear, they actually sound quite a bit like paper. They feel a lot like paper too. They're very, very thick. You may also notice that the leaves alternate all up and down the stem. So those are the couple of ways that I can tell that this is wild quinine. Which this was an extremely important medicinal plant in the 18th and 19th centuries and still remains to be an important medicinal plant to this day. Here you're looking at spotted jewelweed or spotted touch-me-not. And one of the reasons it's called that is because you can see these spots that it has on the inside of the throat. Another name for this plant is jewelweed, and that's the name that most people will know this plant by. This plant absolutely loves low moist environments. As you can see, there are some cattails literally right over there. So this is a really nice low moist environment, and there are a lot of medicinal plants that occur within these kinds of environments. And jewelweed is going to be one of the most prolific that you'll usually see. You can see all of that orange, all those little orange flowers, that's all jewelweed. There's a whole bunch of jewelweed here. Now mixed in with it, there's some morning glories, there's some wand bush clovers, and there's some other things mixed in with it. But for the most part, that is all jewelweed. Now a lot of people know of jewelweed as a medicinal plant to rub on the skin to help alleviate the itch or the burning or the rashing sensation that happens from poison ivy. And it does help with that just a little bit. It doesn't cure it, it doesn't really treat it, it just kind of helps alleviate the discomfort is really what it does. And there you can see the jewelweed, and literally right next to it we have a bunch of boneset plants. Here you can see this boneset plant, and it's just past its flowering stage. As you can see here, these flowers are starting to die off. The leaves have been getting chewed up by ants, as you can see here. However, this is boneset, and this is another medicinal plant. This plant was one of the most important medicinal plants of the 18th century in colonial America, so this plant is extremely important. This plant has been used historically to help treat breakbone or dengue fever. It also can be used as a poultice on top of the skin for rheumatism in a drastic survival situation for the short term. You don't want to use this long term because this plant can cause damage if used too long for too long of a period of time. And there you can see the distinct perforation that's caused by this stem through the leaves on boneset. And another common name for this plant is thoroughwort, which it gets that name because the stem perforates or goes through the leaves. Boneset is a really nice medicinal plant. One of the things I like about boneset, I like to use it more for colds and flus and to kind of help promote sweating, and I like to use it in a tincture form. However, it can be used in a tea form, but whenever it's given warm, it can promote diarrhea or help to evacuate the bowels, which can be good if that's what you need. So keep that in mind if you think about using this plant. And then if we turn around, we can see more boneset right there next to Canadian goldenrod. Here you can see this really nice flower cluster of Canadian goldenrod. You can also see some of this morning glory vine kind of growing along and twining around with it. Canadian goldenrod is well known for its ability to take over fields, and it's also well known for its ability to cause allergies. However, a lot of people who think they're having goldenrod allergies, they're actually experiencing allergies from the ragweed. However, this plant's pollen can cause allergies and some people are allergic to it. But this is another great medicinal plant. This plant can be used for fevers. It also can be used as an expectorant. It can help with colds. This is a really good plant to know just in case you're in a survival situation. Just because the dried flowers make a really nice tea, the fresh flowers make a delicious tea as well. It doesn't taste too bad. Another nice thing about Canadian goldenrod is that it will exist anywhere there's usually clearing or sunlight. I found this plant in the middle of the woods where there's just some sunlight peeking through the forest canopy. I found Canadian goldenrod growing. This plant can grow pretty much anywhere to my experience, so that's kind of a good thing. So if you go to harvest any, you're probably not going to be hurting very much if you just take a few plants. Then of course, if we look on the ground, there's plantain. You can find plantain, again, pretty much anywhere there's a clearing or anywhere that there's grass. Of course, there's dandelion, which both of those are medicinal as well. Plantain is a mucilaginous plant. It can be used to draw out infections. It can also be used for bug bites or bug stings like mosquitoes. It's really good anti-inflammatory. The dandelion is a really good blood thinner. Its nutritive salts contain a lot of blood thinning properties, and it's also very good for the heart. They contain a lot of vitamin A, and the dandelion root also makes an acceptable coffee substitute. And as we continue to go down this way a little bit, I have to take a few more steps. And here you guys may be able to see the blue flowers of great blue lobelia, or Lobelia syphilitica. And that's one of the things this plant was actually used to treat back in the 18th and 19th century with syphilis. However, it didn't really work too terribly well. It's better to be used in place of Lobelia inflata. And Lobelia inflata is a relative of this plant, and Lobelia inflata is a lot more potent. So that's one reason why it's recommended by a lot of herbalists that beginners use blue lobelia instead of Lobelia inflata, because it's not as strong. However, it does work just the same, and they can be used for a lot of the same uses. Here, this blue flower that you see is the flower of blue lettuce. Now, this is one of the many varieties of wild lettuce that occurs within the state of Indiana and within the eastern woodlands. Now, there are a lot of varieties of wild lettuce, and they're usually very difficult to separate one from another. However, during their flowering time, they're usually a lot easier, just because of the color of the flowers. One nice thing about blue lettuce is that it generally grows quite tall, and here's a very medium-sized plant that you can see here. It's only about 3.5, maybe 4 feet tall at the most. Whereas if I turn around, and you can see this thing, you can see this big blue lettuce plant growing up there. Maybe kind of hard to see, but it's right at the tip of my index finger. You can see the flower cluster right there. That plant is absolutely huge. There's its flower cluster there. I know this may be kind of hard to make out on camera, but this plant is about 10 feet tall. And this is one of the tallest plants that grows within the eastern woodlands within the forests. And it's the tallest species of wild lettuce that we have here within the eastern woodlands. One of the many uses, some of the medicinal uses of this plant is to be used as a sedative. Many Native American tribes within the woodlands and across the United States of America use the dried leaves and herbal smoking mixtures as a sedative or to help calm the nerves. Another good thing about this plant is you can use it in tincture form for the same thing. So that's some of the main uses for this plant. It does have others, however, it's best used just to kind of help calm the nerves. But the reason it's a sedative is because it contains opiates. So you've got to be aware of that and make sure that you're not using too much over too long a period of time, because, again, those opiates can cause your body a lot of harm. So be cautious of that when you decide to use this plant. While it is called lettuce, these leaves cannot be eaten raw. They do have to be cooked because of the opiates they contain and the milky latex or the milky sap that this plant has within it. You know, like if I pluck this leaf, there you can see that milky sap starting to come out. And that's why you have to boil these leaves in 2 changes of water. However, this is another medicinal plant. Another medicinal plant that usually occurs anywhere within moist forest land or anywhere within moist land where there is trees, you'll usually find this Canadian sanicle. This is a great medicinal plant. It's really good for inflammation or cuts. It is a pain reliever. It does help to relieve the pain of bruising and the marks of bruising. You can use the leaves, you can use the flowers, you can use the seed clusters, you can use the entire plant for helping to heal inflammation. You can even put it in your bath water. This plant works really well mixed with yarrow and plantain. Whenever you make it into a salve or a balm for topical treatment, this plant works really, really well. All the plants that we just talked about go all the way down to that clearing. So you can see in just a very short distance there is a lot of plants and there's a wide abundance of medicine available to you within swamplands. Yes, the mosquitoes are very bad. However, the medicine that's here is sometimes worth it, especially if you really need it. So I thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. If you want to learn more about edible or medicinal plants, make sure to subscribe.